Hey everyone, hope that you've all recovered from the great windstorm. Hope everybody has their power back. Just got mine back yesterday. So hope you're all doing well before the next storm hits. I just wanted to weigh in and give my thoughts about the two videos we watched this week. The one with Severn Suzuki and the other one with Malala. I thought that both of these were amazing resources, especially the Malala one. But throughout both of these, and even with the other reading that we did this week from the textbook, it seems that there's an underlying theme, and it's been something that's been driving through this entire course pretty much, and that's education is key to everything, to the CRC, to human rights, to implementing the strategies that IB focuses on, teaching the learner profile, teaching these skills. It all comes back to teaching and education. And that is really what matters, really what all of this comes down to in the end. In terms of how to use these videos to teach the learner profile, what I would use both of these videos to teach the learner profile, not how, but I would use them as the teaching points for it. Both of these women more than encompass everything that the learner profile is. Severn was very knowledgeable, a thinker. Both of them were risk takers, standing up in front of large audiences and crowds in the face of adversity because of either their gender or their age or both. And being able to speak their voice, speak their mind, and express their opinions on topics that really mattered to them. They were principled about the way that they went. They tried to give, a very open-minded approach to the situation, especially Malala when she's talking about her resistance of wanting to use violence with the Taliban, even something as simple as hitting them with her shoe. She wanted to come up with a different approach than the way that they used. So I think what I would probably do with these videos is show these to the students, and then have students tell me how do both of these young women personify the different types of the different learner profile traits. And I would then probably go even further and have students use it as an extension activity to say which one of those traits do they most identify with, based on, having seen an example of a young female role model. And I really do think that that's why students would relate to both of these better as role models than, say somebody like Hillary Clinton or, Oprah Winfrey or Ellen DeGeneres or any of these more modern female role models, because these are young women. These were school-age girls, the same age as, some of the students that I teach in 7th and 8th grade when they first started speaking out and facing adversity. But even at that young age, they were able to speak their minds, stand up for education and for their rights. And I think that sends a really strong message to students, is that you don't have to wait to be older. You don't have to wait for somebody else to give you permission to do it. If you're passionate about something and if something matters that much to you, if you see an injustice, there's never a wrong or a right age to begin getting involved and speaking out for that. So I think that just because students would identify with someone closer to their age, somebody who's either similar to them in culture, a Canadian, Caucasian, but being there in Brazil and being able to compare her own personal experiences, Severn's experience with the children in Brazil that were living on the street. And Malala, is a minority from Pakistan, what the U.S. typically considers a very third world country. And she's sitting there talking about how beautiful it is. So a lot of students who might come from what our president dictates to be, the less than desirable countries, so a student in your class who comes from one of those areas might really see that and identify and know that it's okay to not come from a European country or a first world country, and it still is okay to be beautiful. You can still amount to something. You do still have a voice, and your opinion does matter. I think that's part of the reason why Malala especially is so inspiring. Severn, though, took a very different approach. And I think that the values that she personified more was she sort of had a global voice. She was focusing on future generations of all people, not just children, not just women, but all people all over the world. And I think that that's a very big task for her to take on her shoulders. But even still, for students who genuinely want to change the world, I think that Severn could be inspiring to them. If we look at the CRC, which I actually had a hard time going through the CRC and trying to decide which of the articles did not really relate to either one of these young women, because both of them had, I had done so much, and if it didn't relate directly to their story, the articles related in some way to what they had done with their voices and done with their power. But some of the ones that stood out to me the most were obviously Article 1, especially for Malala. A child means every human being below the age of 18. And to Malala, to even say that to the Taliban, she would want education for their children as well. She's not discriminating based on the parents, based on actions, based on gender or race or ethnicity or anything else. She just wants education for everybody, that equality. So definitely that relates for both young ladies. I think freedom of expression in challenges in different ways. But again, I think that that's important for students to know. I would say, Savern was about Savern's voice was more so the traditional route of students. They write an essay, they get nominated to go and take it a step further and then a step further. And then, they're in a national spotlight. We have a few students from our school who, sort of went that same route with science fair projects, and we're very proud of them. It's a great accomplishment. They're now in the semifinals for states. And it's a great accomplishment. But then Malala, on the other hand, took the approach that a lot of students would not think of as being role model behavior, where she stood up to the authority. She stood up and voiced her opinion when something was not right, even though they had threatened her life, even though she knew there could be consequences. And not just for her, she had, thought that her father was in danger as well. But I really think that that shows her determination to enforce that freedom of expression, that she can speak her opinion, she can say what she wants on media outlets, and her life should not be in jeopardy because of that. And so I think that to students, it's really important that we encourage that trait as well. It's easy to focus on the students who are very academically driven, who want to be the ones to change the world. But I think that both of these stories combined could really help capture some of those other students who portray those defiant characteristics, but might be easier to kind of harness those characteristics into a force for good instead of a force for evil. And I think that by doing that, it's okay to show them that your opinion matters, even if it's different from the teachers, even if it's different from administration, and to show as well that there is a way to voice your opinion in a positive and respectful manner. Just like Malala was doing with, in her recounting of situations with the Taliban. And even, Savern was very respectful in the way that she was addressing her dissatisfaction with all these current world leaders and representatives of all these governments. She was scolding them like a, parent does to a child, but she was the child scolding all of these world leaders. So I think it's important for students to know that they have that kind of voice, that they have that kind of right to express themselves. Also, when it comes to mass media, obviously the climate convention in Brazil, even though it was in 1992, back then it was, a very big deal. So much so that in watching the video, I noticed there have been multiple updated 25th anniversary editions of that same speech, and that she also went on even more to create a documentary about her fight for climate change, using again those mass media outlets to enhance their message and for good. And same thing with Malala, starting the Malala Fund, publishing a book, and all of her interviews that she's done, even including on Comedy Central, a place that you wouldn't normally think that you would see a, Pakistani survivor of the Taliban, child educational activist. But again, just to show students the power of mass media. And I think especially with how addicted our students are to technology when it comes to smartphones and hashtags and Snapchat and Instagram, Twitter and everything else, it's really important to show them how social media can be used as a force for good, a force for change, for starting a movement, a lot like what the students have done in the wake of the Lakeland shooting. And Also, for Savern, she hit a lot on Article 24, which is the highest attainable standard of health. And although the article goes on to kind of address more so like facilities and health standards in regards to that, but the first statement of there is the highest attainable standard of health, which, as she was mentioning, as Severn was mentioning in her speech at the environmental convention, she was going through and explaining, all the, the harmful effects of the ozone layer and pollution and finding fish with cancers. And I think, that again is her enforcing her right, not just for her, but also for future generations of children. And again, equal opportunity in education, I think that applies to both of them. Savern was fighting for equal opportunity for present children and future children. And I think that, Malala was fighting for children regardless of circumstance, gender, race, any of that. She wants equality education, or I guess also equitable education for children all over the world. And so, again, that's her purpose there with the Malala Fund. I also think that these videos would be really good too to pull in extension activities to who are women that are role models in today's society. Depending on the age group of your students, you could talk about, the risk takers with the Me Too movement. If you have a little bit older students that you can talk about that with. For younger students, you can tie it in with, again, more pop culture references that they're familiar with. Things like Wonder Woman and how, that's been one of the biggest blockbuster movies of the past year. And the big waves that has made in inspiring women to be the strong hero of films instead of having to always be the damsel in distress. So I think that all of those kind of things can lead to conversations about, gender, about equality. Black Panther as well, another movie that's been taking off great, and also had strong women in the film too. And you can go on there to talk about historical figures that have had big impacts. Rosa Parks, all these women who were civil rights activists, but then they were also women, and so fighting, for standards on multiple fronts there. And I think that mostly these videos can just be used as a platform to kind of launch off on these points of further discussion about which one of the articles matters most to students. I think that both of these videos really do highlight the entirety of the learner profile. And especially internationally mindedness too. A few weeks ago I was at NYP networking conference, and it was at the U.S. State Department. And while we were there, they were talking about a STEM program that's happening in Africa, and it invites women or female students from all over the world to come and try and encourage them to get involved in the STEM program because it is so heavy on the male side. So I think even something like that for internationally mindedness to get, young women together from all over the world to meet in Africa, where it's not the first place that comes to mind as a hub for technology, but to have them all come together, it's paid for by this conference if they're accepted to it, and to have these young women come together and start being the leading voices in technology, to get used to working with STEM and robotics and coding and all of this kind of great stuff that a lot of women have been pushed to the side from in those fields. So I think internationally minded in that way, by using these female role models, we can continue to propel women and encourage them around the world to stand up and support one another. So that's pretty much where I thought the videos took. I thought that they were both great examples. I absolutely adore Malala. I think she's a wonderful role model for women, not just our students, but for women all over the world. So I'm very excited to be using her in class. And I hope to also encourage my students to read her book. I know that a lot of them will personally identify with it because of her religion and her background. So I think that this was a really great read for this week, and I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you.